Alina sat by her office window watching the rain trace soft lines down the glass. The city lights shimmered below, each one a reminder of the world she had built, the company, the brand, the empire. She was the kind of woman people admired from a distance, confident, calm, unshaken by challenges. But no one saw what happened when the office lights turned off and the doors closed behind her. Most nights she stayed longer than everyone else. The silence helped her think, or at least that's what she told herself. But in truth, she just didn't want to go home yet. Her apartment was quiet, too quiet. It used to be filled with laughter and the sound of piano music before everything changed 5 years ago. It was the accident that took her ability to walk, but it didn't take her will to rise. After months in the hospital and endless therapy sessions, she made a decision. If life was going to take something away, she would build something bigger in return. So she poured herself into work, one deal at a time, one sleepless night after another, until she became one of the youngest CEOs in the city. People respected her, but they also feared her. She was known for her precision, her discipline, and her cold calmness in the boardroom. Yet behind that image was a woman who had forgotten what warmth felt like. Not physical warmth, but the kind that comes from being truly seen. Earlier that day, her assistant had brought in flowers from a partner company. Everyone praised her latest success, a merger that would make the firm even stronger. There were congratulations and polite smiles. But as soon as they left, the flowers felt like just another decoration, something bright but meaningless. She looked at her reflection in the window now. A neatly tied bun, a perfect suit, and the faintest trace of lipstick she hadn't retouched all day. Her wheelchair gleamed beside her desk. Clean, functional, polished like everything else in her life. But inside she felt like something was missing, something she couldn't put into words. When the rain grew heavier, she decided to leave early, or at least earlier than usual. Her driver had taken the night off and she didn't mind driving herself. The car gave her a sense of freedom. She loved the feeling of moving fast even if she wasn't the one walking. The city was quiet as she drove through the dim streets, her favorite playlist humming softly through the speakers. The rain hit the windshield like tiny whispers, calming yet lonely. A few miles from her apartment, her car began to sputter. She frowned and pulled over, noticing smoke rising from under the hood. She sighed, opening her phone to call for roadside assistance. But the signal was weak. It was late, and the area looked unfamiliar. A small row of shops, a flickering streetlight, and a cafe that still had its lights on. Taking a deep breath, she rolled down her window and looked around. The cafe sign read Milo's Corner. Warm light spilled from its windows, and inside she could see a few people cleaning up. She hesitated for a second before unlocking her wheelchair and getting out. The air was cold, and the ground was slick from rain, but she moved carefully toward the cafe. A man inside noticed her struggling with the door and quickly came over to help. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with the kind of face that looked tired but kind. His hands were rough, like someone who worked with tools, not computers. "Need a hand?" he asked, pushing the door gently open. "Thank you," she said softly, rolling inside. "My car broke down a few blocks away. Do you happen to know any mechanic nearby?" He smiled faintly. "You're in luck. I actually work at the garage right around the corner. I was just helping close the cafe for my sister." "Oh," she said, surprised. "That's convenient," he chuckled. "I guess sometimes the rain brings the right kind of luck. Let me grab my jacket. I'll take a look at your car." She nodded, still unsure how to feel. She wasn't used to strangers offering help without hesitation. Usually people treated her with careful politeness, the kind that hides discomfort. But he spoke easily, like her wheelchair didn't even register to him as something unusual. A few minutes later, they stood by her car. He opened the hood, checking wires and pipes under the flickering streetlight. "Looks like the battery's drained," he said after a while. "Maybe something shorted when it started raining. I can fix it, but I'll need to take it to the garage for a bit." "It's not far." "That's fine," she replied. "Can I wait there?" "Of course," he said, smiling again. "It's warmer inside and I've got coffee." She almost laughed. It had been so long since someone spoke to her like that. Casual, friendly, without the tone people use when they recognize her as the Alina. At the garage, the smell of oil and metal filled the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of coffee. It was small but tidy, with tools neatly arranged and an old radio playing soft music. She watched as he worked, sleeves rolled up, focus in his eyes. "So," he said, tightening a bolt, "what were you doing out here in this weather?" "Most people stay inside when it rains this hard." She smiled lightly. "I guess I like quiet nights. The rain makes everything softer." He nodded. "Yeah, it's like the world slows down for a bit." There was a silence, not awkward, just peaceful. She found herself studying his face. He had a warmth in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Like he carried his own stories but didn't let them make him bitter. When he was done, he wiped his hands and poured her a cup of coffee from the old machine. "It's not fancy," he said with a small grin, "but it's strong." She took a sip and smiled. "It's perfect. So what do you do?" he asked, leaning against the workbench. For a second she hesitated. She was used to people reacting when they found out who she was. But something about him made her want to keep it simple. "I run a small business," she said. He nodded. "That's cool. I respect that. Running something on your own isn't easy." "Yeah," she said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like the hardest part isn't the work. It's being the one everyone looks at for answers." He smiled knowingly. "I get that. I've got a little one at home. She thinks I know everything. I don't, but I try to make it look like I do," she chuckled. "That's a lot of pressure." "Tell me about it," he said with a grin. "But she's my whole world, so I don't mind." Something in his voice softened her. The way he spoke about his daughter wasn't dramatic, just full of quiet love. By the time the car was ready, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. She thanked him and reached for her wallet, but he shook his head. "Don't worry about it. You can pay next time if it happens again." "I can't just not pay," she said, surprised. He shrugged. "Then buy another cup of coffee next time you're around." "That's fair," she smiled. "All right. Coffee then." When she got back into her car, she glanced at him one last time through the window. He waved, his expression easy and warm. For a reason she couldn't explain, something inside her felt lighter, like the rain had washed away a bit of the weight she'd been carrying. That night, when she reached home, she sat in the dark for a while, thinking about the stranger who didn't treat her like a symbol or a story. He just saw her, a person with a broken car on a rainy night. She didn't even know his name, but his words replayed in her head as she fell asleep. Sometimes the rain brings the right kind of luck. And though she didn't know it yet, that night was the beginning of something that would quietly change her life. Something that would remind her what it truly meant to be seen, not for her success or her struggles, but for her soul. The morning after the rainy night felt strangely peaceful for Alina. The sunlight filtered through her window, resting gently on her desk where her coffee cup sat untouched. Usually her morning started with phone calls, schedules, and endless emails. But that day she found herself thinking about the man from the garage instead. She tried to remember the details. His calm voice, the way he spoke without hesitation, and how he didn't flinch when he saw her wheelchair. It was rare for her to meet someone who didn't make it awkward, who didn't pretend not to notice or overcompensate with kindness. He was just normal, and that made all the difference. Work, however, didn't slow down. Her assistant reminded her of a full day ahead. Investor calls, a meeting with the design team, and a charity board discussion in the evening. She listened, nodded, and smiled as always, hiding how tired she felt inside. Hours passed like minutes, and yet, the one thing she kept circling back to was that brief encounter, how it had felt so unexpectedly human. Late that afternoon, her company's operations manager walked in with a proposal. "We're considering offering a service contract to a few local garages for company car maintenance," he explained. "We'll need to choose one soon." Her eyes paused at one of the names on the list, Milo's Auto Works, the same place where the kind stranger worked. She almost smiled. It was a coincidence, but something about it made her heart stir. "Invite them in," she said casually, trying not to sound too interested. "Let's meet the owners and see what they can offer." The following week, the meeting took place in one of the company's smaller conference rooms. Alina entered quietly, her presence commanding respect as always. The staff stood when she arrived, and she gave a polite nod before settling in. When the representative from Milo's Auto Works walked in, her heart gave a small, unexpected jolt. It was him, the same man from that rainy night. He looked a little nervous this time, dressed neatly in a clean shirt, carrying a folder of papers. For a moment their eyes met. She saw recognition flash across his face, followed by a soft smile. Good to see you again, he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. You too, she replied, keeping her tone calm though her chest fluttered slightly. The meeting began and he spoke with quiet confidence. He wasn't a polished businessman like the ones she usually dealt with, but there was something genuine about his words. He explained how his small team focused on honesty, fair prices, and personal service. There were no rehearsed lines, no exaggerated promises, just sincerity. When the meeting ended, she found herself wanting to talk more. So as everyone began leaving, she asked him to stay back for a moment. You did well, she said softly. Most people try too hard to impress me. He chuckled. I wouldn't even know how to do that. I just told the truth. That's rare, she said almost to herself. He smiled, his eyes kind but curious. You never told me what kind of business you run. I didn't expect you to be the one in charge here. Does that change anything? She asked, testing him slightly. Not really, he said after a moment. You're still the same person I met that night. The one whose car wouldn't start and drank terrible garage coffee. She laughed softly, something she hadn't done freely in a long time. It really was terrible coffee. Hey, you finished it, he said with a grin. For a few minutes, they talked like old friends and about weather, work, and his daughter, who apparently loved to paint on the garage walls when he wasn't looking. There was an ease between them that felt rare in her world, where every conversation usually had a goal or a hidden meaning. Before he left, she said, If the contract goes through, you'll be hearing from my team. He nodded, shaking her hand. Either way, it was nice running into you again. As he walked away, she caught herself smiling. Not the polite corporate smile she gave in meetings, but a real one. The kind that came from somewhere deep inside. Over the next few weeks, the contract was approved, and Milo's Auto Works officially began servicing her company vehicles. It wasn't a major deal financially, but it mattered to her in ways she couldn't explain. It gave her an excuse to visit the garage now and then, to check on the work, even though she knew her managers had it under control. The first time she went back, his daughter was there. A cheerful little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with curly hair and paint-stained fingers. She was sitting near a workbench drawing cars in a small notebook. Hi, the girl said shyly when she saw Alina. Are you Daddy's boss? Alina smiled. Something like that. The man looked embarrassed. Sorry, she's curious about everyone. It's all right, Alina said warmly. I like curious people. The girl grinned and proudly showed her a picture she'd drawn. It was of her dad fixing a car with big colorful wheels and smiling faces. This is us, the little one said. That's Daddy and that's me helping. Alina looked at the drawing for a long moment. It was so full of love, simple, pure, and alive. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen something so genuine. As days turned into weeks, she started visiting more often. Sometimes she'd bring coffee or pastries for the staff. Other times she'd just sit for a while, chatting with him about ordinary things, how his daughter was doing in school, how the business was going, or how her company was expanding into new projects. He listened when she spoke, really listened. Not because of her title, but because he cared about what she said. It made her feel human again, something she hadn't felt in years. One evening, after most of the workers had gone home, they sat together outside the garage, watching the sunset paint the sky. The air smelled faintly of oil and rain. You know, he said quietly. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? She asked, smiling slightly. I don't know, someone harder. Someone too busy to smile. She thought for a moment. I was that person. Maybe I still am sometimes. It's just that life has a way of teaching us to build walls. Yeah, he said softly. And sometimes the right people help you see over them. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth in his words. There was no pity in his eyes, no curiosity about her wheelchair, no judgment, just warmth. That night when she went home, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking about how strange life could be, how two people from such different worlds could cross paths in the most unexpected way. She had all the success she once dreamed of, but it was this simple connection that filled her heart. Over the next few weeks, they spoke often, sometimes through short messages about work, sometimes about things that had nothing to do with it. He'd send pictures of his daughter's latest artwork, and she'd share stories about her dog or her childhood. Slowly, without realizing it, they began to share more of themselves, the small, real parts that people often hide. For Alina, it was both exciting and frightening. She wasn't used to letting anyone close. She had been hurt before, not just by the accident, but by people who left when life became hard. Trust didn't come easily, but he never rushed her, never made her feel pressured to open up. He was patient, always kind, always steady, and every time she saw him, she felt a little lighter. One evening, after a long day at work, she found herself driving by the garage again. The lights were still on, and she could see him cleaning tools while his daughter colored nearby. She parked outside and watched for a moment, smiling softly. It was a simple scene, but it warmed her heart in a way no luxury ever had. She thought about how life had once felt empty despite her success. But now something had changed. She couldn't name it yet, but she could feel it, like a quiet flame had been lit somewhere deep inside her. Before leaving, she rolled down her window and called out softly, "Don't work too late." "The world needs more sunsets." He looked up surprised and smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." As she drove away, the streetlights flickered on, guiding her home. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was just existing. She felt alive, quietly, gently, unexpectedly alive. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Alina had felt in years. Her life, once filled with deadlines and empty boardrooms, now had small sparks of something new: warmth. She didn't plan it, but she found herself visiting the garage more often than she ever needed to. Sometimes she'd bring coffee, sometimes just a reason to talk. The visits started as professional check-ins, but now they had turned into quiet moments she secretly looked forward to. He was always there, steady, grounded, and kind. There was something about him that felt like home. Maybe it was the way he spoke without trying to impress anyone, or how his laughter came easily, even when things around him weren't perfect. His daughter was often nearby, drawing or humming to herself. Every time Alina saw the little girl's bright smile, something inside her softened. Her world had always been one of control, every minute planned, every risk calculated. But around him, things didn't have to make sense. She could just be. No titles, no expectations. Just a woman talking to a man who somehow made the world feel simple again. One afternoon, she arrived at the garage unexpectedly. He was fixing a delivery van, sleeves rolled up, his hair messy, a few smudges of oil on his face. She smiled, watching him for a moment before he noticed her. "You're early," he said, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Don't tell me another car's broken down already." "Not this time," she said lightly. "I was just passing by." "Passing by?" he teased, raising an eyebrow. "Or looking for another cup of terrible coffee?" She laughed. "Maybe both." He handed her a cup with a grin. "Still the same brand?" "Still terrible." She took a sip and made a face. "You're right. It hasn't improved." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that felt easy and real. For a moment, the sound of machines and tools faded into the background. It was just the two of them, standing there with coffee in hand, smiling like they'd known each other for years. After a while, he glanced at her car. "You've got time for a quick drive?" "I could use a break." She hesitated but nodded. "Where to?" "You'll see," he said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. He drove them to a nearby park, quiet, green, and peaceful. Children ran around, laughter echoing in the distance. His daughter was already there with his sister, playing with other kids. When the little one saw him, she ran over, hugging his leg. "You came," she said happily, then turned to Alina. "And you came too." Alina smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "I couldn't miss seeing your new drawings." The little girl giggled and took her hand, showing her a small sketchbook full of colorful pictures, cars, flowers, and tiny houses. "Daddy says you're very smart," she said proudly. "He says you're the boss of everything." Alina laughed softly. "That's not true. He's the boss of fixing cars, isn't he?" The little girl nodded, her eyes bright. "Yes, but you both work too much. You should play sometimes." Her words made them both smile, but they also hit something deeper. Maybe she was right. Maybe they both had spent too long being strong for everyone else. As the evening light grew softer, they sat together on a wooden bench, watching the children play. He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think people like you lived in a different world. Fancy offices, big houses, people running around with papers. But then I met you and I realized you're just like anyone else, maybe even lonelier." Her chest tightened a little at his honesty. You're not wrong, she admitted. I built my company from nothing. It gave me everything I thought I wanted. But when I finally had it all, I realized I didn't have anyone to share it with. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. It's strange, isn't it? We spend so much time building things, homes, jobs, dreams, and sometimes we forget why we started in the first place. Why did you start your garage? She asked softly. He smiled faintly. After my wife left, I needed to do something that made me feel useful again. I couldn't just sit around. The garage gave me purpose. And my daughter. She gave me strength. She doesn't care if I'm rich or successful. She just cares if I'm there. There was silence for a while, broken only by the sounds of children laughing in the distance. Alina watched him, her heart heavy with something she couldn't name. There was so much simplicity in his words, yet they carried a truth that pierced through her carefully built walls. Later that night, when she returned home, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about his eyes, his honesty, the way he looked at her without pity or admiration, just understanding. She didn't know what this connection was turning into, but it felt real. And that scared her. Over the next few days, she buried herself in work trying to shake off the feeling, but it only grew stronger. She'd catch herself checking her phone, wondering if he'd message her, or glancing at the clock, thinking of excuses to visit the garage again. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper. A quiet pull, like her heart finally recognizing a piece it had been missing. One rainy evening, she decided to stop by again. The garage lights were still on. When she entered, she found him sitting at a small table, sorting bills and papers. He looked up and smiled. You always show up when it rains, he said. Starting to think you bring the weather with you? Maybe, she said with a grin. Or maybe the rain just knows where I need to be. He offered her a seat. You look tired. It's been a long week, she admitted. Meetings, deadlines, the usual chaos. Then you came to the right place, he said. We're fresh out of fancy coffee, but the company's good. They talked for a long time that night, about everything and nothing. She told him about the pressure of being seen as perfect all the time, how people only saw her success or her wheelchair, never the person in between. He listened quietly, never interrupting, never offering forced comfort. Just being there was enough. At one point, she said softly, You're easy to talk to. He smiled. That's because I don't have an agenda. I just like hearing your story. My story's not very simple, she said. Neither is mine, he replied. But simple doesn't mean better. Sometimes the complicated stories are the ones worth hearing. Something about the way he said it made her heart ache. Maybe because she'd spent so many years trying to hide the complicated parts of her own story. Before leaving, she said quietly, You make it seem easy, living like this, staying kind when life hasn't been kind back. He shook his head. It's not easy, but kindness doesn't cost me anything. And sometimes, it's the only thing that keeps me going. That night, as she drove home, she realized she was smiling again. Not because of success or recognition, but because of him, and the way he made her feel seen without trying. Days passed and their friendship deepened. People around her started noticing changes too. Her assistant said she seemed lighter, happier. Even her board members noticed a softer tone in her meetings. They didn't know why, and she wasn't ready to explain. Some things didn't need explaining, but as her connection with him grew, so did her fear. They came from different worlds. She was used to cameras, media, and scrutiny. He lived quietly, content with his small circle. What would people say if they found out? Would they judge him? Would they pity her? The thought made her uneasy. Yet every time she saw him, laughing, with his daughter wiping oil off his hands, speaking with quiet confidence, and she couldn't help but think that maybe this was what she had been searching for all along. Not perfection, not wealth, but peace. One evening, as she was leaving the garage, he walked her to her car. The streetlights glowed softly, the air cool and still. She turned to him and said, You know, you've changed the way I see things. He smiled. How so? She looked at him for a long moment. You remind me that people can still be good, that not everything has to be about power or status. Sometimes it's just about showing up, about being kind. He didn't say anything, but his eyes said everything she needed to hear. As she drove away, she felt something stir inside her, a quiet certainty that her life was shifting. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Meeting him wasn't an accident. It was the universe's gentle way of reminding her that love in its purest form doesn't care about status, appearances, or titles. It simply sees the soul. The morning sunlight entered Alina's office, but she hardly noticed. The past few weeks had felt like a dream she didn't want to wake from. Every day seemed a little brighter now, every moment lighter. She caught herself, smiling at random times, during meetings, on her way to work, even when she looked out the window at the city below. It wasn't that her problems had disappeared. The pressure of being the CEO was still there. The endless meetings, the careful image she had to maintain, the eyes that followed her wherever she went. But now, something had changed inside her. She had someone who reminded her that life was more than just numbers and goals. Her friendship with him had become something precious, fragile yet strong. They didn't talk about what it was, and maybe that was what made it beautiful. Some things didn't need labels. They just existed quietly, between two hearts that understood each other. But the world she lived in didn't like quiet things. The world she came from demanded stories, explanations, gossip, reasons to judge. And it wasn't long before that world started noticing. It started with small whispers. A few people in her office began talking about her spending time outside the circle. Then came the photos. One of her leaving his garage, another of them sitting together in a park. Someone from a gossip blog must have seen her there. The headline read, "CEO seen spending late nights with unknown mechanic. Secret relationship?" When her assistant showed her the article, Alina froze. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. The photos weren't inappropriate, nothing more than two people talking, smiling, sharing coffee. But she knew how the world worked. People didn't care about context, they cared about stories, and they would twist this one however they wanted. Within hours, the article spread. Some people mocked her. Others praised her for being brave. Investors called, asking if she wanted to release a statement. Her PR team panicked, trying to control the damage. But Alina stayed quiet. She didn't owe anyone an explanation for her life. What hurt most wasn't the rumors about her. It was knowing how it might affect him. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. His life was simple, peaceful. Until now. She tried calling him, but he didn't answer. By evening, she decided to go see him. When she reached the garage, the lights were still on, but the air felt heavy. He was there cleaning tools, his face tense. "You saw it," she said softly. He nodded without looking at her. "Yeah, it's everywhere." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." He sighed, putting down the wrench in his hand. "I know you didn't, but people are calling the garage asking questions. Some of my clients canceled today. They think I'm using you for publicity." She felt her chest tighten. "That's not true. I'll fix it." He finally looked at her, not with anger, but with something worse. Sadness. "How? You can't fix what people think. They'll always see what they want to see." "Then let them," she said quickly. "We know the truth." He shook his head. "You live in a different world, Alina. You're used to this. I'm not. I just wanted a simple life for me and my daughter. Now people are looking at me like I did something wrong." She felt tears rising but fought them back. "Please don't shut me out. We didn't do anything wrong." He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I know that, but I have to think about her. I can handle being judged, but I can't let her get dragged into this." There was silence, the kind that sits heavy in the air, filling all the space between words. She finally said, "So what are you saying?" He looked down, his voice quiet. "Maybe we need to take a step back, just until things calm down." Her heart sank. "A step back?" I don't want to, he said quickly. But right now, it feels like being near me is hurting you too. The news, the investors, your reputation. Stop, she said sharply. I don't care about that. But you should, he said softly, because it's part of who you are, and I don't want to be the reason people look at you differently. She wanted to argue, to tell him that none of it mattered, but his eyes stopped her. They were tired, not of her, but of the weight of everything. So she nodded, even though it broke her inside. If that's what you need. He looked like he wanted to reach for her, but he didn't. It's just for now, he said. I just need to protect what little peace I have. She nodded again, forcing a small smile. I understand. When she left that night, the rain started falling again. Soft, cold, relentless. She sat in her car for a long time before driving home. For the first time in months, she felt that old. Loneliness creeping back in heavier than ever. The next few days were silent, no messages, no calls. The city went back to its rhythm, but Alina couldn't. She went to work, said the right words, smiled in the right moments. But inside, she felt hollow. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was him. It never was. At night, she'd look at the small painting his daughter had given her, a drawing of a car and a woman smiling beside it. She kept it on her desk now, hidden under paper so no one would ask about it. Her assistant tried to comfort her once. The story will fade, ma'am. It always does, she nodded but said nothing. The world would move on, yes, but she wasn't sure she could. One evening, she decided to visit the park where they used to meet. It was nearly empty, the benches wet from rain. She sat there in silence, watching the puddles reflect the fading sky. For the first time in years, she felt small. Not because of her wheelchair, not because of the headlines, but because she had found something real. And it was slipping away. Meanwhile, he was at the garage, staring at the same sky through the open doors. His daughter sat nearby, humming softly as she colored. He watched her and felt a wave of guilt. He missed Alina, more than he wanted to admit. But he didn't know how to make things right without making things worse. The days turned into weeks. The rumors finally began to fade, replaced by new stories, new gossip. But the silence between them remained. Then one morning, Alina received an invitation to a community event. It was a project her company had sponsored, a new recreation center for children with disabilities. She had planned it months ago before everything changed. She didn't want to go, but something inside her said she should. When she arrived, the place was buzzing with life. Children laughing, families gathering, volunteers helping everywhere. And then she saw him. He was there, wearing a volunteer badge, helping guide kids through the building. His daughter was beside him, handing out balloons. For a moment, she froze. He looked up and saw her too. Their eyes met and time seemed to stop. He walked over slowly, unsure of what to say. You came, he said quietly. I had to, she replied. This project means a lot to me, he nodded. You did a good thing here. The kids love it. She looked around at the children, some in wheelchairs, some with crutches, all smiling. They deserve places like this, she said softly. Somewhere they don't feel different. He nodded again, his voice gentler. You always said you wanted to make a difference. You did. For a moment, they just stood there, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. Then she said quietly, I missed this. Talking to you. He looked down. I missed you too. It was the first honest thing either of them had said in weeks. Before she could say anything else, his daughter ran up, holding 2 small paper hearts she had cut out. One for you, she said to Alina, and one for Daddy. Alina took it gently. Thank you, sweetheart. The little girl smiled and skipped away, leaving them in silence once again. He looked at the paper heart in his hand. She still talks about you, you know. Keeps asking when you'll come for coffee again. Alina smiled faintly. Maybe soon, he nodded, eyes meeting hers. Maybe soon. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet. But it was something, a small bridge forming where there had been silence. As the event ended, they stood together for a while, watching the children play. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the park, and for the first time since everything fell apart, Alina felt hope again. Maybe they couldn't undo the past. But maybe, just maybe, the rain had washed away enough for something new to grow in its place. Alina woke up that morning with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. She had spent weeks thinking about this day, and now it was here. The community project at the recreation center had gone well, and she knew he would be there. She didn't know what she would say or how he would react, but she knew she had to try. For the first time in a long while, she felt the butterflies she had thought she had lost forever. Her apartment was quiet, peaceful, and yet her mind was buzzing with possibilities. She dressed simply, choosing a comfortable outfit and sneakers, something that would let her move easily. Today wasn't about appearances. It was about truth, about courage, about letting herself be vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed for years. The drive to the recreation center was short, but it felt long. She rehearsed what she might say, discarded it, and started again. None of the lines felt right. How could words ever capture what she felt? How could she explain that in a few weeks a man and his little girl had changed the way she looked at life, love, and herself? When she arrived, she saw him immediately. He was helping a group of children organize a small activity, some drawing, some laughing, some running around with balloons. His daughter was there too, giggling as she tried to keep up with her friends. He looked up, saw her, and for a brief moment his expression changed. There was surprise, yes, but also relief. He walked over slowly as if approaching something fragile. "You came," he said softly, his voice steady but gentle. "I had to," Alina said, a small smile forming on her lips. "I couldn't stay away." They stood together for a moment, taking in the sounds of children laughing, the sunlight glinting off the new playground equipment, and the soft hum of activity. It felt like the world had paused for them, as if everything else didn't matter. "I've missed this," she admitted quietly. "Talking to you. Being around you. It's been hard these past weeks." He nodded, eyes softening. "It's been hard for me too. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want to put my daughter in a difficult situation. I thought distancing myself was the only way." "Maybe it was," she said, "but it also made me realize how much I care, and how much I need you." He looked at her, searching her face as if reading every word in her eyes before she spoke it aloud. "I care too," he said quietly. "More than I expected. More than I can explain sometimes." There was silence for a moment, filled only by the sounds of children playing. Then she took a deep breath. "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to let fear decide for me. We can't control what people think, but we can control what we do, how we live, and who we choose to be with." He smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting both relief and a quiet emotion she couldn't name. "I want that too," he said. "I want to try. I want us to be honest, even if it's scary." For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to plan everything perfectly. They just needed to start, to be together in the simplest, most genuine way possible. They walked toward the playground where his daughter was waiting. She ran up to them, hugging both of them tightly. "You're back!" she exclaimed. "I missed you." Alina laughed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I missed you too," she said, ruffling the little girl's hair gently. He watched them with a soft smile, a kind of quiet pride that made Alina's heart swell. She realized then that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfection. It was in these small moments, showing up, being present, caring, and protecting those you loved. They spent the afternoon together, helping with activities, talking to families, and laughing at the children's antics. It was ordinary yet extraordinary. Ordinary because it was simple, extraordinary because it reminded them both of what truly mattered. At one point, they sat together on a bench, watching the sun dip low in the sky. The children were still running around, their laughter echoing across the playground. "You know," he said quietly, "I was afraid that being with you would complicate everything. That I would ruin something beautiful." "You didn't," she said softly. "You made it real. You reminded me that life isn't about walls or perfection. It's about connection, about seeing each other." He reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. For the first time, it felt natural, easy, and safe. "I want us to move forward," he said. "No fear, no pretending. Just us." She nodded, squeezing his hand gently. "I want that too." The little girl ran over again, holding a small flower she had picked from the garden nearby. "For you," she said, handing it to Alina. Because you make Daddy happy. Alina took it, her eyes brimming with tears. Thank you, sweetheart, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You make him happy too. He looked at her then, his eyes soft and steady. You do, he said. You make my life better. You make us better. For a moment, everything around them faded. The people, the noise, the worries of the world. There was just them. Just this quiet understanding that what they had was real and worth protecting. As the evening grew darker, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, they walked together to the edge of the park. He helped her into her wheelchair, and she noticed how naturally he did it. Not with pity, not with hesitation, but with care and respect, you see, he said softly. You've changed the way I look at things, too. I've been stronger than I realized just by being around you. You remind me that life can still be kind even when it's hard. And you've reminded me, she said, her voice steady now, that I don't have to be alone, that I can trust, that I can let someone in, and that being vulnerable isn't a weakness. He smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Then let's start over, he said simply. Not as CEO and mechanic, not as the woman in a wheelchair and the single dad, just as two people who finally found each other. She felt her heart swell. She nodded, smiling through tears. Yes, just us. That night as they drove home together, the city lights blurred softly outside the window. They didn't need to fill the silence with words. The comfort of being together was enough. She realized that love wasn't a grand announcement or a dramatic gesture. It was in the quiet moments, the shared smiles, the small acts of kindness, and the courage to be honest with each other. For Alina, this was more than she had ever imagined. She had worked tirelessly for success, for recognition, for power, but in the end, it wasn't any of that that made her feel alive. It was the gentle, steady presence of someone who saw her soul and accepted her completely, someone who reminded her that she was more than her achievements, more than her wheelchair, more than the world thought she had to be. Weeks turned into months, and their bond only grew stronger. They spent time together in simple ways. Shared dinners at home, walks in the park, helping with community projects. His daughter became her little shadow, always laughing and bringing joy to the quiet corners of her life. Alina noticed that her work didn't feel as heavy anymore. Meetings and deadlines still existed, but they no longer defined her. There was balance now, a reminder that life wasn't just about control or perfection. It was about connection, love, and the courage to be vulnerable. One evening, as they sat together in the backyard of his small home, the sky painted in stars, he turned to her. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said quietly. Someone who sees me, not what I have or don't have. Someone who makes me want to be better, not for the world, but for us. She reached out and took his hand, holding it tightly. And I never thought I'd find someone who sees me, she whispered. Truly sees me. You remind me who I am beneath all the titles, beneath all the expectations. You remind me that love is simple, even if the world makes it complicated. They sat together in silence, letting the stars witness the moment. There were no grand declarations, no crowds, no headlines. Just two people, two hearts, and a quiet promise meant to be there for each other, to see each other, and to love each other without fear. And in that moment, Alina realized that life had finally brought her exactly what she needed. Not fame, not power, not admiration, but a soul who saw her, understood her, and chose to stay. For the first time in years, she felt completely whole,